The Grand Hall of Lemuria's central district sparkled with crystalline structures that refracted the binary sun's light into 1,000 prismatic colors. Eris stood before the ornate altar, her heart hammering against her chest as she tried to ignore the whispers echoing through the vast chamber. Her pale skin, slightly pointed ears, and larger-than-standard eyes drew disapproving glances from the assembled guests, all perfect specimens of Lemurian beauty. The union between Talk and Era shall now commence. The officiant's voice resonated through the hall. Era's hands trembled as she reached for Talk's, her betrothed of 5 seasons. She had worked tirelessly to meet society's standards, undergone countless treatments to minimize her differences, all for this moment. Talk's perfectly chiseled features remained expressionless as he withdrew his hands. "I decline." The words echoed through the chamber, followed by a suffocating silence. Era's breath caught in her throat. "I will not bind myself to someone who cannot meet the most basic standards of our society." Talk continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Her imperfections are an affront to the purity of Lemurian lineage." Era's legs threatened to buckle. The room spun as hundreds of pairs of perfectly aligned eyes bore into her. She could feel her differences magnified under their scrutiny, every flaw she tried to hide now exposed for mockery. The shame burned through her like acid. "This ceremony is hereby dissolved," the officiant declared, his tone maintaining professional neutrality despite the scandal unfolding before him. Era turned to flee, her vision blurring with unshed tears. She barely noticed the figure stepping into her path until a warm hand touched her shoulder. "Are you all right?" The voice held an accent she didn't recognize, softer, more varied in its tones. She looked up to see a man with brown hair and kind eyes that held genuine concern. His features were different from any Lemurian, not ugly, just unfamiliar. "You're human," she whispered, recognizing the species that visited occasionally for diplomatic purposes. "Ethan Walker," he introduced himself, maintaining a respectful distance. "I was here as an observer. I'm so sorry for what just happened. It was cruel." "I'm Era," she managed, though speaking those words in this context felt like admitting to a crime. "Would you like to step outside? Get some air?" Ethan's suggestion was gentle, without pity. She nodded, allowing him to guide her through a side door into the enclosed gardens. The artificial atmosphere within the dome maintained perfect conditions for Lemuria's aesthetic flora, each flower bred for symmetry, each tree pruned to mathematical precision. "On Earth," Ethan began conversationally, "we have a saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It means different cultures, different people, see beauty differently." Eris sank onto a bench, her formal robes pooling around her like water. "But here, beauty has specific parameters, measurements, standards, and you think that makes you less worthy?" He sat nearby, maintaining appropriate distance while projecting warmth. "Look at me," she gestured to herself. "My skin is too pale, my ears too pronounced, my eyes disproportionate." "I see someone unique," Ethan interrupted. "Someone whose features tell a story, who carries herself with dignity despite incredible pressure." No one had ever spoken to her like this before. Era stared at him, searching for mockery or ulterior motives, but found only sincerity. "I should go," she said finally, standing abruptly. The humiliation of the day was too fresh to process kindness. "If you ever need someone to talk to," Ethan offered, "someone who isn't bound by Lemurian standards, I'm staying at the Earth Embassy for the next solar cycle." She nodded absently and hurried away, leaving the gardens and Ethan behind. In her quarters, Era faced her reflection in the viewing panel. The same face that had haunted her for 23 rotations stared back, but now it carried additional weight. The knowledge that she was so far from perfect that even a willing union could not overlook her defects. She sank to the floor, years of suppressed emotions finally breaking through. The tears came in waves, each sob releasing memories of childhood taunts, medical assessments declaring her substandard, and the countless rejections for positions requiring aesthetic compatibility. When exhaustion finally claimed her, Era's sleep was fitful, punctuated by recurring nightmares of being paraded before crowds for judgment. The next day, she remained secluded, ignoring the concerned messages from family and friends. The silence was broken when her door chimed unexpectedly. Standing outside was Ethan, holding a small package wrapped in earthen style. "I thought you might appreciate these," he said, offering the package when Era opened the door crack. "They're from my grandmother's. Garden on Earth." Inside were seeds, irregular shapes and sizes, nothing like the uniform specimens approved for Lemuria horticulture. "They grow into wildflowers," Ethan explained. "Each bloom is different, unique. We treasure that diversity." Despite herself, Era was intrigued. Why would anyone prefer inconsistency? Because uniformity can be stifling. Because differences create beauty we never expected. He paused. "May I come in? I'd like to hear your story, if you're willing to share." Against her better judgment, Era allowed him entry. Over the next several hours, she found herself opening up to this stranger in ways she never had with her own people. He listened without interrupting, without offering solutions, without judgment. In Lemurian preschool, she shared, voice trembling with old wounds. Children learn to identify and report aesthetic anomalies. I spent my earliest memories being the subject of those lessons. That's institutional cruelty disguised as education. Ethan responded, anger coloring his usually gentle tone. "It's our way," Era defended automatically, though the words felt hollow. "Does that make it right?" The question haunted her long after Ethan left, promising to return the next day. Their subsequent meetings became a routine. Ethan shared stories of Earth's diverse cultures, showing images of people celebrating differences rather than erasing them. Era, in turn, revealed the depth of pressure she'd endured, the treatments and modifications she'd undergone to edge closer to acceptability. "I had my ear tips surgically reduced when I was 16, she confessed one day. "The doctor said it would improve my marriage prospects by 0.73%. "And how did that work out?" Ethan asked gently. Era's laugh held no humor. Clearly not well enough. As days passed into weeks, Era found her perspective shifting. Ethan's presence became something she looked forward to, his different worldview offering relief from Lemurian rigidity. When he looked at her, she saw appreciation rather than assessment. But their growing connection didn't go unnoticed. Talk, hearing rumors of Era's association with an alien, appeared at her quarters one evening. "Consorting with that primitive?" he sneered, pushing past her into the room. "Have you no shame remaining?" "What I do is no longer your concern," Era replied, surprised by her own steadiness. "Everything you do reflects on those who associated with you. Your family's reputation suffers for your continued public presence. Perhaps isolation on the outer stations would benefit everyone." "Perhaps you should leave," she countered, feeling strength she hadn't known she possessed. Talk's perfect features twisted with rage. "You dare speak to me with such insolence? You should be grateful I entertained this farce as long as I did." "I'm grateful it ended," Era realized with startling clarity. "I'm grateful I don't have to spend my life trying to please someone who sees me as defective." "Careful, Era. Your position in society hangs by a thread. Snap it, and you'll find life very difficult indeed." After Talk left, Era sank onto her seating unit, her newfound courage wavering. The reality of her situation pressed down. Shunned by her former betrothed, watched by society, finding comfort only in the company of someone her people considered inferior. When Ethan arrived the following day, she shared the encounter. "He's right about one thing," Ethan mused. "I am primitive compared to your civilization's advancement. But perhaps being primitive means holding on to some basic values your society has lost." "Values like what?" "Like judging people by their character rather than their conformity to arbitrary standards." The seed of rebellion planted by their conversations grew stronger each day. Era began venturing out more, caring less about disapproving stares. She planted Ethan's wildflower seeds in a hidden corner of her quarters, watching with wonder as irregular blossoms emerged, each one beautiful in its imperfection. As the binary suns completed another rotation, Ethan made an unexpected announcement. I've requested extension of my mission here. The Earth Council approved. Era's heart lifted, followed immediately by fear. Why? Because I believe in what's happening here, between us. And maybe, just maybe, I can help others see what I see. Their meetings became bolder, sometimes in public spaces where whispers followed their every move. Era's family contacted her less frequently, their messages tinged with concern about her reputation. Even her closest friend, Mira, suggested perhaps some distance from the human would restore her standing. But something fundamental had shifted in Era. For the first time, she felt seen, truly seen, not as a collection of measurements to be improved, but as a whole being worthy of regard. The turning point came when they visited the Museum of Lemurian Excellence, an institution dedicated to showcasing the evolution toward perfect form. Look at these ancient specimens. Era gestured to the displays. See how imperfect our ancestors were. Irregular features, asymmetrical bodies, varying skin tones. And look at the innovation they achieved. Ethan countered, pointing to the accompanying text. Your greatest scientific breakthroughs, your most beautiful art, created by people who didn't meet current beauty standards. The pursuit of physical perfection required setting aside mere irregularities. But at what cost? You've eliminated uniqueness, creativity born from different perspectives, the very diversity that drives evolution and innovation. Guards approached, having noticed their loud discussion disturbing other visitors. This section is for contemplation of our civilization's advancement, one stated. Disruptive behavior is not permitted. As they were politely ushered out, Era felt both embarrassed and strangely exhilarated. She'd never questioned these fundamental truths of her society before. In the following weeks, their philosophical debates deepened. Ethan introduced concepts foreign to Lemurian thought: individualism, personal fulfillment beyond social function, love as a bond strengthened by rather than despite differences. On Earth, he explained one evening as they walked through the perfectly maintained pathways of the Central District, we have a tradition. When two people want to pledge their lives to each other, they exchange personal vows, not prescribed by society, but words from the heart. We have the binding ceremony, Era responded. Geneticists approve matches based on compatibility indexes. Vows are standardized to ensure equal commitment. But what if you want to promise something specific? Something uniquely yours? The question lingered as they parted for the evening. That night, Era dreamed not of judgment halls and measuring instruments, but of Ethan speaking words meant only for her, of ceremonies celebrating union rather than quantifying it. Her dreams were interrupted by an urgent communication. The Department of Social Harmony had scheduled a mandatory consultation regarding her concerning behavioral patterns. The next day, facing 3 officials in sterile white uniforms, Era felt her new confidence falter. Your association with the Earth delegate has become a matter of public discussion, the senior official stated. Rumors suggest romantic attachment. I don't discuss my private matters with strangers, Era replied, immediately regretting her tone. We are not strangers. We are guardians of social order. Your actions affect community harmony. How? By talking with someone? By learning about other cultures? By elevating an inferior species to inappropriate intimacy? By publicly displaying deviant behavior? The word deviant struck like a physical blow. Era had worked her entire life to avoid such labels. I'm doing nothing wrong. You're associating yourself with someone beneath your station, accepting his foreign values, allowing him to influence your thinking. This behavior suggests corruption of Lemurian ideals. When Era reported this meeting to Ethan, he responded with unexpected intensity. Their right to be threatened. New ideas challenge static systems. Change always frightens those benefiting from current structures. I don't want to cause problems, Era protested. You're not causing problems. You're recognizing them. He reached across the table where they often shared meals, his hand hovering near hers, a gesture still too bold for public spaces. The question is, what do you want to do about it? That night, Era stood before her reflection again. The same features that had brought a lifetime of shame suddenly seemed less like flaws and more like characteristics. Her pale skin caught light differently than standard tones. Her larger eyes noticed details others missed. Her pointed ears, she touched them tentatively. When had she stopped seeing them as failures of genetics and started seeing them as simply part of who she was? The realization crystallized a decision forming within her. The next time she met Ethan, she made an announcement. I want to try something. Her voice trembled but held determination. I want to have a binding ceremony. With you. Ethan's surprise quickly transformed into concern. Era, the social consequences. I know. I've spent my life being defined by what others see as wrong with me. Maybe it's time I define myself by what I see as right. And being with you, that feels right. They spent the next days preparing in secret. Lemurian law required the ceremony to be public, but private ceremonies were impossible to prosecute. They would hold a small gathering, just a few witnesses who might sympathize. But on the morning of their planned ceremony, the unthinkable happened. Despite their precautions, word had leaked. Outside Era's residence, a crowd had gathered. Think, they'll actually go through with it. The hybrid thing won't be legally recognized anyway. Disgraceful. Setting an example of this corruption should discourage others. Facing the mob mentality meant for her wedding day filled Era with terror, but also resolve. She emerged in traditional bonding attire modified to accommodate her features rather than hide them. Ethan waited beside a hastily arranged altar in her quarters' common space. The few supporters present formed a protective semicircle as hostile observers pressed against the building's security barriers. We don't have to do this, Ethan whispered as angry voices filtered through soundproofing. Yes, we do, Era insisted. Not just for us. For anyone who's ever felt wrong for being different. The ceremony began with traditional words, but quickly diverged when they reached the personal vows section. Instead of standard pledges, Ethan spoke. Era, when I look at you, I don't see measurements or indexes. I see courage. I see someone who questions injustice, who grows despite being asked to diminish herself. I see beauty that defies definition because it comes from within. Her response caught in her throat as emotion overwhelmed prepared words. I promise to never again measure my worth by someone else's standards. I promise to be the bridge between worlds that see with different eyes. I promise to choose love over fear, truth over conformity. As they sealed their bond with the traditional hand-clasping gesture, the building's security alarm screamed. The crowd had breached the outer barriers. We should have a magistrate here to witness this mockery, someone shouted. Let's show them what real Lemurians think of such deviation. The security door burst open. But instead of an angry mob, they faced an individual group, led by Talk himself, his perfect features twisted with rage. Behind him stood 2 Harmony Department officials. This ceremony is unauthorized, Talk declared. The participants will be detained for social restructuring. Fear paralyzed Era, but Ethan stepped forward. By what authority? Era has broken no law. Neither have I. The authority of maintaining our civilization's integrity, one official responded. This mockery of our sacred traditions. Stop! The command came from behind them. A figure emerged from the shadows, Dr. Kian, renowned geneticist and member of the Social Council. This ceremony, while unconventional, is not illegal, he stated. And perhaps, he paused, glancing at Era and Ethan, perhaps it's time we examined whether our definitions of integrity have become too narrow. Talk sputtered protests, but Dr. Kian continued, I have observed similar bondings across the galaxy during my cultural research. Species that celebrate differences rather than eradicate them often demonstrate greater adaptability, innovation, and social resilience. The crowd shifted uncertainly. The arrival of such a respected authority supporting the unthinkable created cognitive dissonance. The council will review this matter, Dr. Kian concluded. For now, the ceremony concludes as witnessed. With those words, transformation rippled through the gathering. Some retreated in disgust. Others lingered with newfound curiosity. Dr. Kian approached Era privately before departing. My daughter was deemed aesthetically insufficient at birth. We applied every treatment available to help her meet standards. She took her own life last season, leaving a note saying she was tired of trying to be someone else's version of perfect. The revelation struck Era speechless. Perhaps, he continued, it's time some of us considered that perfect can coexist with unique. In the ceremony's aftermath, Ethan's mission status became complicated. Earth's diplomatic corps supported his stay, but Lemurian authorities pushed for his departure. They can't force me to leave, he told Era, but they can make legal residence difficult. We might need to leave Lemuria. The prospect terrified but also excited her. Earth, or somewhere in between. The neutral stations welcome various species. We could build something new. Their departure date approached rapidly as bureaucratic pressures mounted. Talk continued agitating for penalties against cultural contamination, while sympathetic groups began emerging, often calling themselves Variant Pride. The farewell wasn't ceremonial, just quiet packing and careful goodbyes to the few who openly supported them. Yet as their transport departed Lemuria's pristine atmosphere, Era felt liberation rather than loss. Life on the neutral stations proved chaotic but invigorating. Multiple species coexisted, cultures blending and clashing in constant evolution. Era discovered others who'd left homes where they didn't fit, finding community in shared differentness. She began teaching comparative culture, sharing insights from both Lemurian and Earth perspectives. Ethan worked in interspecies relations, helping facilitate communication across drastically different worldviews. Their small quarters rapidly filled with tokens from various cultures: irregular pottery, asymmetrical sculptures, fabric woven with chaotic patterns. Era planted her wildflowers in containers adapted for station life, delighting as they bloomed in riotous color. Sometimes she missed Lemuria's orderly beauty, but those pangs grew fainter as she watched two species create art together. 5 different anatomies collaborate on engineering problems, and children play without consciousness of their various appearances. News from Lemuria trickled through occasional communications. Dr. Kean had submitted formal proposals for variation-tolerant studies. Small groups gathered to discuss beauty diversity. The changes were microscopic by most standards, but revolutionary for Lemuria. One day, nearly a solar year after their departure, they received an unexpected visitor. Mira, Era's childhood friend, stepped tentatively from the docking shuttle. I couldn't come before, she explained over shared meal. My position, my family, but watching what happened to you changed something in me. I started questioning things I'd never examined. Myra's skin bore fresh treatment marks, attempts to lighten her naturally golden tones to standard pale. I finally realized I'll never be perfect enough, so maybe I should stop trying. She stayed a week, absorbing station life with growing wonder. Before leaving, she made a confession. There are others. Back home, watching, wondering, waiting for someone to prove life exists beyond the standards. After her departure, Era found herself contemplating return visits, not to rejoin that society, but to offer example, proof that happiness existed outside conformity. Would you ever want to go back? She asked Ethan one evening as they tended their indoor garden. To visit? Perhaps. To live? He considered carefully. I think we're building something better here. A place where beautiful doesn't need quotation marks. Seasons blended into years. Their unconventional bond produced unexpected offspring, a daughter whose features blended both heritage in ways neither society's standards could define. They raised her without measurements, without predetermined templates for acceptable existence. When their daughter reached the age Era had been when first deemed insufficient, they returned to Lemuria for official diplomatic proceedings. The planet seemed simultaneously unchanged and subtly different. The aesthetic standards remained, but alongside perfect sculptures stood installations celebrating diverse form interpretation. Medical facilities offered cosmetic modifications, but also counseling for standard pressure syndrome. A small movement called Beauty Boundless had gained followers, though they still operated carefully within legal parameters. At the spaceport, they encountered an elderly man in work clothes, tending to the mechanical systems. When he turned, Era recognized talk despite years of changes. Era, he acknowledged, his perfect features now showing age lines considered unfashionable. And your family, their daughter, unaware of history, studied him curiously. Are you from here? You look different from most people. Talk's laugh held complex tones. I suppose I do. Age tends to reveal what surgeries try to hide. Our people made you try to be someone you weren't, Era observed carefully. I believe I played my part enthusiastically, he admitted. After a pause, he added, I work here now, maintaining the systems. They considered it suitable employment for someone past aesthetic peak. The implication struck Era powerfully. Even those who embodied perfection eventually fell short in Lemurian society. Be well, she wished him, meaning it sincerely. Aboard the transport departing Lemuria, their daughter asked countless questions about the peculiar world where everyone aimed to look exactly right. Why don't they just look however they want? Era gathered her close. This child whose existence proved love transcends cellular structure. Some places haven't learned that looking different isn't the same as being wrong. That's sad, the girl declared with childhood certainty. Yes, Era agreed. But that's why change matters. One person at a time. As Lemuria shrank to a point of light behind them, Era reflected on the journey from that altar where she'd been rejected for imperfection to this reality where imperfection meant authenticity, where love meant accepting rather than altering. Ethan's hand found hers, a gesture now familiar, precious, no longer rebellious but simply theirs. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me. All of me, even when I couldn't. In the comfortable silence that followed, Era understood something profound. The standards that had once defined her worth now seemed as distant as Lemuria itself, a past stage in evolution's journey, toward understanding that beauty, like love, expands to accommodate infinite variations. Their daughter dozed against Era's shoulder while Ethan planned their next destination. The transport carried them forward not just through space but through possibility, each moment writing new definitions of what it meant to be perfectly oneself. The seeds of change they'd planted would continue growing, both in themselves and in the worlds they touched. Not every Lemurian would abandon pursuit of physical perfection, just as not every Earth human celebrated diversity fully. But bridges built between absolutes created paths for others to walk. Years later, Era would receive invitations to speak at Lemurian institutes about developmental psychology and social innovation. She would decline some, accept others, always accompanied by her family, living proof that worth transcends measurements, that love requires courage rather than conformity. Their story would be told across stations as cautionary tale, inspiration, and symbol. Some would emphasize the romance, different species finding connection. Others would focus on rebellion against oppressive standards. Children would act out scenes in plays, debate its meaning in ethical philosophy classes. But for Era, now middle-aged and thoroughly content in her irregular skin, the simplest truth remained. She had been rejected for failing to fit a mold, only to discover that breaking molds created space for unprecedented beauty to flourish. In quiet moments, between the bustle of multi-species station life, Era would tend her ever-expanding garden of wildflowers, each bloom imperfect yet complete unto itself. Sometimes Ethan would join her, their daughter working nearby on homework that integrated multiple cultural perspectives. These were the moments that validated every difficult choice, every challenge to conventional wisdom. These seeds of new thinking would continue spreading, some taking root, others struggling against traditional soil, but all contributing to an eventually more diverse and resilient garden of understanding. Love had proven stronger than shame, courage more powerful than conformity. And in their corner of the galaxy, beauty remained forever altered by those willing to define it for themselves.